Mobile hunters, if you're interested in upping your mobile game, then head to tetherednation.com and check out their saddle gear. There are a few things that you can buy that will actually help you become a better deer hunter or give you the freedom to hunt any tree or any situation. This reason is why I started saddle hunting in the first place and why I use Tethered's gear. I can honestly say that Tethered's saddle gear has changed how I hunt for the better. Big tree, little tree, from the ground, it doesn't matter. I'm untethered by my gear to hunt the best setup for the situation instead of hunting for a tree that my gear can use. My current core setup consists of the Phantom saddle, tethered one sticks, and the Predator platform, and along with an assortment of their accessories. So if you want to up your mobile game, head over to tetherednation.com. If you're like me, you spend a lot of time poring over maps, looking at weather data, all in an effort to help predict when and where my best times are to hunt. It'd be nice if there was a reliable source with all this information in one place. Enter the Spartan Forge app. Unlike some other predictive apps on the market, Spartan Forge was created from military combat intelligence experience tailored for hunters and stands at the nexus of machine learning and whitetail deer hunting. No more man-made algorithms. This is a predictive model based on real GPS collared deer data, historical and predictive weather, and the next level of mapping imagery, all at my fingertips. I've had an opportunity to use the desktop version last year and have been using the iOS app this season, and it has replaced all my other mapping tools. Visit SpartanForge.ai and sign up today, or head to your iOS or Android app store and download it today. Welcome to the Truth from a Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 266. Today, we're talking Alabama Slammers with Michael Perry, so stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you are doing well. Hope you are feeling fine. Hopefully you are feeling better than I am at the moment. I managed to catch the bad stuff and finally, I think, on the mend. It was a rough couple days. I wanted to make sure I got this upfront pulled together and this podcast out for you guys this weekend, or this week rather. I don't think I've ever missed a week unintentionally in 6 years of putting out the podcast, and I sure as shit wasn't going to let this illness that I got going on be the culprit of that. But I am going to keep this up front pretty short to try to avoid any significant coughing fits that I may launch into. Two quick pieces of housekeeping for you guys before we jump into it is want to make mention that the Great American Outdoor Show is coming up here at the beginning of February. I think it's the 5th is the first day, if I'm not mistaken. I will be there the opening Saturday of the Great American Outdoor Show in Harrisburg. You can visit me at one of two booths I'll be at. Our boys from Exodus will have a booth in the archery hall. That's booth 927 is the Exodus booth. Stop by and say hi to me. If I'm not there at that moment, say hi to Chad, give him some shit, say hi to Jake, and say hi to all the boys. Tethered also will have a booth in the archery hall at 1033. I think it's in the archery hall. Regardless, the booth number is 1033, and I will be spending some time there that day as well. That is the opening Saturday of the Great American Outdoor Show in Harrisburg. So with that, I have a super cool show for you guys today. Talking to Michael Perry. You might think that you've heard from Michael Perry on the show before, because there is a Michael Perry of Pennsylvania who I've had on the show in the past. This is Michael Perry who resides in Alabama. I found out from him whenever I was doing a podcast with my buddies from Exodus, and we were talking about some of the best deer hunters that maybe no one has ever heard of. And I was told, man, if you're looking for a guy from the South and you want to meet a dude who just is a straight killer and, you know, puts critters on the ground, Michael Perry's the guy you need to talk to. And so I sought him out. He was willing to come on the show, and we had an awesome conversation. He's a guy who's got deer in the books and record books in Alabama with a bow, with a rifle. And then this past year, he killed an absolute giant that he'll tell the story of with his muzzleloader this year. So he's in with three different forms of take, which is super cool. Super good dude, awesome hunter. Is just very much kind of a purist and a guy that spends time in the timber. And is just a true outdoorsman, which, is something I think we should all probably kind of aspire to be. The other kind of kicker is we didn't really get into this a whole lot, but I know just from his story a little bit, he does a lot of hunting with his wife, so it's a hunting couple as well. So it's not just him. His wife is also a killer as well. But I had the opportunity to have Michael on this time. Maybe next time we'll make it a family affair. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and just jump into the show. And as always, thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I am talking to, I'm getting a little Southern flavor on the podcast today, and I wanted to do this by way of a gentleman by the name of Michael Perry. So, Michael, the way I actually learned about you is we were doing a kind of top 5 DIY unknown kind of goats, if you will, or best DIY bow hunters in the country that nobody or that few people know about, right? That was kind of like the criteria. And we were going through the list, and my buddy actually mentioned your name. You were on his list of consideration. And what he told me was, because I was like, I've been doing the podcast for a while, like 6 years. Like fortunate enough to know a lot of different guys from a lot of different states and stuff like that. And your name I had never run across before, and I was surprised. And he said, if you want to know how to kill big deer in the South, there is one man to talk to, and his name is Michael Perry. And so he's a good friend of mine that I have a lot of respect for. So once he told me that, I was like, all right, I gotta find this Michael Perry guy and talk to him. So how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. It's funny to say that because I was coming back from Iowa. My brother and Mike Perry, the guy from Pennsylvania I'm friends with on Facebook and stuff, and he had messaged me about it, and we listened to the podcast when we were driving home. So it was pretty neat. So y'all had a good list of some fine hunters for sure.
Nice. Yeah. Mike's a good guy. We message back and forth every so often. When I was out in Iowa, actually, he was, I guess that was 2 seasons ago, maybe 3 seasons ago, 3 seasons, I think. I missed a big deer during archer season that year out there. And, he was messaging me, after I had the miss and just giving me some words of encouragement and stuff like that. So he's a good guy. He's a killer. And it must run in the Perry name, man. Michael Perry. You guys any relation?
No, we're not. We're not. As far as I know, we're not anyway. So, but
no,
that'd be something to look up. But no,
yeah.
Most of my people come out of Georgia. So.
Okay, very nice. Is that where you're originally from, Georgia?
No, I'm from Alabama, but my grandpa and his family, they come across from Georgia heading toward Texas, and then when they got to Texas, I've told this story I think a time or two. They took the old grandma off, or went across in wagons, and they took her off and set her out there, and she's looking across the horizon and says, "I don't like it." So they turn around and come back and stopped in Alabama, and that's where we set up from. So.
Man, that's a pretty organic way to land in Alabama. I like that grandma was ruling the roost, man. That's she was the king of the castle, I guess, or queen of the castle.
They had to make her happy, but my grandma wasn't happy. Nobody's happy. So here we are.
Yeah, it's funny. The more things change, the more they stay the same, right? It's still the same in this house too.
Yeah, that is true. So.
Yeah, that's right. So, man, I know you were you just mentioned you were coming back from Iowa. You're just out in Iowa. You were out for a late season a trip, if I'm not mistaken. So it was your buddy that was hunting. Were you hunting as well, or were you out there just kind of giving him a hand?
No, I had a tag, and a friend of mine, Jacob Myers. I don't know if you know him, but he had a tag. We kind of put in together, and there's 3 other guys that put in too, but they put in for the second shotgun. They were up there before us, and out of 5 of us, Jacob was the only one that killed. But of course, it was public land, and talking about some pressure, there was a lot of pressure. Them hunts run back to back to back, and the deer were very on edge, and just the last few minutes before dark most of the time, if you see any. So
right,
we run cameras for over a month, and so we had some guys put some out for us on different types of trails and scrapes and stuff. We had about 1,700 pictures, mostly deer, and 95% of them was at night. There was no decent bucks in daylight, so
right.
It was pretty normal for what you see on public land, even down here in the South, about the bucks, movement on pressured land. So, but like I said, I didn't have any luck. I passed a 120 or so. We had muzzleloader. It was a late muzzleloader season hunt. So, and seen a couple more good ones that just too far out. So
yeah, it's funny that folks that have never been, for folks that haven't been to Iowa to hunt, they have this
illusion maybe of how clean it is, you know, how unpressured it is or whatever. I just had a buddy of mine on last week. His podcast just came out. He killed a great one this year in bow season. I think he was either October 31st or it might have been November 1st. I don't remember exactly what the date was. Right there at the end of October, beginning of November. It was his biggest archery buck to date. I think it was 160 and some change, I think is what it was. And I ran into him while I was hunting out there in a parking lot is how we met. And we just kind of got to talking about what you were just mentioning, which is those folks who have never been to Iowa to hunt think that you go out there and you just don't ever see a soul on public land. And I know, at least from bow hunting perspective, it's not as much as Pennsylvania, and I'll get, you know, for sure Pennsylvania, Michigan, like I'll give it that during bow season, but the way their seasons kind of run back to back to back and stuff like that, when you're hunting late season out there, man, like those are some pretty pressured deer that you're running into.
Right. Well, they're very pressured. I've never seen so many lock-ons or ladder stands in a place in my life. We went to 4 different areas, and when we went to one place, we were standing where 3 fingers come together, and there's 4 different ladder stands. And it was amazing.
Right.
So it's highly pressured. So.
Right. Now, did you have any snow out there to be able to do a little bit of tracking, or no?
When we first got there, it snowed, but it wasn't. It was like 4 inches in the lower part of the state, but we're kind of where we was at around an inch, but it wasn't enough to really do much. So
nice. Now, after that muzzleloader hunt, have you been out? I'm assuming you've been out for archery season in the past before too, right?
Out to Iowa?
Yeah.
No, that's the first time I've been to Iowa. The only other place I've been to bow hunting outside Alabama is Wyoming, public land, mule deer and whitetail, and I've took a couple mule deer with a bow, spot stock, one whitetail in Wyoming with a bow, and then I went to Illinois on some public land and passed up 1 or 2 smaller ones, but wasn't successful. And that's the only time I've been out of state. So
okay,
it's hard to leave Alabama during the rut for the main place I hunt, because the ruts kind of coincide with Iowa and Illinois and stuff like that. So
okay, gotcha. Do you have any plans to try to make it out there during archery season one of these years?
It's a thought. I really like the lake muzzleloader hunt, really, to tell you the truth, but it's a thought, 'cause we found some travel corridors and stuff that was like, wow, if you could be up here during the archery hunt during the rut, it would be something.
Yeah.
So, but it's a thought, so we'll see. So.
Nice. Yeah. I have a buddy of mine who usually, I don't think he did it this year, but he pretty frequently gets a muzzleloader tag to go out. And his rationale is basically, he's like, look, I'll hunt the rut around here, you know, in Pennsylvania. And then, you know, he'll go out there for late, you know, for muzzleloader season, because he's like, I can more easily draw the tag. You know, he's like, and a lot of times he'll take his bow and hunt it. Now he hunts a combination of public, and then he does have a family out there that he knows that he can hunt their farm. So he usually will kind of check that out, and if it's good, he might spend some time there. If not, then he just kind of ventures off onto public land. But I'll definitely give it a vote for you to go out during archery season. It was one of those places of all those states that I've hunted. I'm trying to figure out how to say it. I've never seen or have never hunted in a place where I just so frequently watched deer just do deer things during archery season. Like where during that time of year that there's not a ton of pressure, even on the public I was on. I saw guys, but it wasn't overrun by any stretch of the imagination. And so everything that you would hope would work, whether it's rattling or snort wheezing or whatever the case was, I was getting responses to all that. Where Pennsylvania, you throw out a rattle, good luck. Like, it's probably going to run 3 states away. You know what I mean? Like, calling to anything around here just doesn't seem to work. But, you know, it certainly works there. And that was just kind of really cool to see, because it's something I don't get to experience very much in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Alabama, to me, on public land, it's kind of similar. It's got to be the right situation and a completely right setup to rattle and to try to make it work. It's too hard in most places I hunt to catch them. Well, the big bucks will always circle, pretty much get downwind of you, and it's hard. You got to have some kind of hard back wall behind you or something, where they can't get behind you or can't get downwind of you or something like that to be successful. And I don't do that much.
Yeah, out there, it just I won't say it worked with every deer, but you got a response. It worked more often than not, shall we say? And same thing here in PA. You know, I usually don't even take rattling antlers into the woods with me during, you know, in Pennsylvania during any time of the season. Faintly will grunt once in a while if I can have a visual on the deer and I can see his body language. And if he seems like he's calm and he's not on edge, or if he seems like he's aggressive, if he's posturing or whatever, then, maybe I'll throw something out to him. But otherwise, man, I pick the spot and know that I should be in the right area. And hopefully they pass that. Hopefully I did my homework and they passed that tree. That's kind of my game plan.
I like the sneak approach, the assassin style or whatever. I don't want, if I can help it, I don't want to know I'm even hunting them if I can. So.
Right. Yeah. So before we jump into things, man, we talked a little bit about your background, but if you wouldn't mind just to kind of kick things off, let folks out there listening know, where you're from and what you do for a living.
Yeah. I'm 57 years old and I'm born and raised in Alabama. I've been working at a chemical plant now for 25 years, 12-hour swing shifts. So I'm just a working guy. I spent 5 years in the Navy when I was younger. Grew up trapping and squirrel hunting and bird hunting, stuff like that. Done a little deer hunt, but I was not successful until later on in life. My dad and his buddies, they all like muzzleloader style hunting, either sex hunts, and that's pretty much, they were just trying to kill a deer. Me and my brother, we didn't really get into the big buck thing or trying to get bigger bucks until later on. He killed a big old 180-inch 18-point on some public land, and that was like a whole different level. So we kind of changed our tactics, and I didn't kill my first good deer until I was 31 years old, and then so after that I've killed some good ones, and I'm not as trophy minded as some would think, or some people would want. Where our goal is to try to get a 3.5-year-old off of public land in Alabama, and that's pretty tough sometimes. I've killed some 5 and 6 years old, but it's public land's a different game. I understand why people want to try to let them get older and stuff like that, but to me, I don't like any restrictions on public land. Some people are trying to put something in the freezer or whatever, so that's fine with me. If that's what you want to do, I'm plenty happy with it, as long as you're getting out and enjoying outdoors. So, but
yep.
Public land is what I really love doing. I've done some few out of state trips as far as big game or dangerous game or something like that, but Alabama public land whitetails is the main thing I do. I'll do it all type of weapons, muzzleloader, bow and rifle. So and my wife, Kathy, goes a lot with me, and she's been pretty successful too. So we just really enjoy it, love the outdoors, and have fun with it.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, it's funny you mentioned trapping, because all the podcasts that I've done, a lot of the guys that I talk to that are who I would consider to be really just kind of true woodsmen, and killing big whitetails just kind of happens to be something they do also, but they're kind of a woodsman at heart. That's kind of like their foundation, if you will. Trapping always ends up making its way in there somewhere. Like that's one of the things that I've kind of consistently heard, especially with, fellas that came up during the hunting time where there wasn't a ton of hunting media and podcasts and stuff like that. How much do you think kind of learning how to trap and like understanding, how those critters are behaving and how they're reacting to scent and stuff like that, how much of that do you think has helped you in understanding, how to really kind of get after whitetails?
Oh, that's helped them a lot, because especially dry ground trapping, you had to be as scent free as stuff as you could, and you're trying to make an animal put its foot on a 1-inch piece of steel, in the area that you're trapping. So it helps you to learn how they travel, how careful they are, how they use trails and pinch points and just natural travel corridors. So it helps a lot, especially lamb trapping and blind style trapping, where you're not using any kind of scent. You're trying, like I was saying earlier about the deer hunting or buck hunting, trying to catch them without them not knowing you're in the area. You got to keep them relaxed. So trapping helps a lot to learn how to do that.
What was your favorite, or what was your preference of what you were trapping?
I love trapping coyotes and foxes, the dry ground stuff. It was harder, catching raccoons and beaver and muskrats and stuff like that was a lot easier. It was more challenging to catch a coyote or fox or something like that on dry ground.
Right. So I'd mentioned previously that I've been to Alabama once. It was for it was for work. I had a video shoot thing that I had to do for work, and was in Alabama. But like we were talking earlier, it's one of the places though that I have, you know, a buddy who, you know, lives there, hunts there, kills big deer. And I almost feel like Alabama is just a little bit overlooked in terms of the quality of the deer
Right.
in the area. You know,
Right.
I guess from your perspective, you know, what makes Alabama like unique in terms of whitetail hunting, particularly mature whitetails, or challenging to hunt them as well?
We kind of I had this discussion with somebody else that hunts out of state and stuff. In Alabama, you know, say out west or Midwest, you're looking for 140s and above. Or Alabama, you know, 140 is comparable to say a 100 or maybe a 110. And but there's a chance, you know, the state record archery buck is around 220 something inches, and the gun is 2 something. I think there's a 3, possibly a 300 or something like that. But there's been some 200s killed on public land, mainly in one area, but there's genetics here, but there's plenty of deer, more than, you know, a lot of states. And then the areas that I hunt is big woods style hunting, so it's more challenging. And some of the other areas have a lot of thick cutover and stuff like that. So once the pressure goes on, it's they can get in places where you can't get to them without them hearing you, smelling you, or seeing you. So it's a tough challenging, but it's got its trophies. And I've been, you know, pretty successful, and some other folks have, but I mean, if you want to try it, I'm welcome to come spend a little money, come on down here and try it. We have a rut that you can chase pretty much from early November all the way to February in different parts of the state, and even on public land. So that makes it fun. That's kind of what I do, is kind of chase the rut when it starts in early November, and then play it like that. So.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've always wanted to do is, you know, once everything kind of wraps up for me up here, you know, because rut, like a lot of places, right, sometime early November is really when it hits, and then our gun season comes in, you know, right after Thanksgiving, you know, really. And I would love to be able to kind of take a trip and kind of just, I've kind of dreamed of kind of doing the rut hop of just kind of chasing it in different places after November, which would be really cool. And I've certainly seen some big deer come out of Alabama. That one place that I was working, the house that we were at where we were shooting, I walked in and I saw like these 2 mounts on the wall, and the person, it was like, I think someone had passed away, and it was an estate that they basically used it then for like picnics, and you could rent it out if you wanted to and host you know, a family event or whatever the case was. And we walked into this place, and I'm looking around. There's these 2 big mounts on the wall, and I thought maybe they were just for decoration. There was a guy that was there who was a relative of like who had originally owned owned the property. And I looked at him, and I'm like, "Those deer come off this property?" He was like, "Yeah, they killed those." He told me when they killed them. I forget when it was, and they were probably both over. One was probably mid 150s, the other one was probably mid 160s, and I was just like, you got to be, because the area that we were in, it's like I would have never thought that it held that kind of, you know, that caliber of deer necessarily. And then I met my buddy Brian, you know, that you and I kind of mentioned when we were talking offline, that owns Day 6 Gear, and he hunts in Alabama and kills big deer. And so from that point on, I was kind of like, you know what, I got to at some point try to figure out how to make my way to Alabama, at least to experience it. And if I'm not mistaken, there's a fair amount of water access that's around Alabama just in general too, right? Like as far as like,
you can kayak, boat, whatever. There's plenty of places to do that. We got a lot of water systems and stuff like that, and quite a few public land that has water access and stuff. And our season starts in part of the state bow season October 1st and ends February 10th. So
wow.
The public land that I hunt on, when like gun season and stuff, they have special days, certain days where they have guns and muzzleloaders. You know, it's usually on weekends. Some of them's 4 days, some of them's 5 days, and some of them can be 2-day hunts. And so once them start, it's a little harder to bow hunt, you know, in between them hunts, because you can bow hunt, you know, from October 1st to their season closes on them. There's sometimes it's specific dates, but it makes it more challenging once the muzzleloader and stuff starts for people that bow hunt. Like I say, I'll use all the weapons that are available. If it's open for me to use a muzzleloader, I'm toting a muzzleloader. and or if it's rifle to hunt, I'm hunting rifle. But this year I set to go up to kill one with a muzzleloader till I get one record buck with a muzzleloader. So I've been toting muzzleloader all year. So
Yeah, and I definitely want to get to that at the toward the end of the conversation. I want to hear the story about that because that was an incredible. It's an incredible deer. But I guess you mentioned big woods, but before we get to kind of like the terrain and stuff that you're hunting specifically, I'm always curious, to kind of when I talk to guys to try to understand, their approach to hunting in general. Like some guys that would say that they're that they're aggressive. Other guys will say, well, they're patient. And they do a lot more observation sits and then kind of go in and strike. Right. Some guys are mobile. Some guys preset things, and just know that, they've picked the right spot and they're just waiting to hunt that spot because that's the spot. I'm curious, how would you describe your approach to hunting?
My approach is the main area. We got, different types of terrain. The main area I hunt is kind of a mountain. It's up to around 1,100 square feet or 1,100 feet altitude. And then from 50 foot, so it got some up and down hills, and it's pretty much big woods, a little bit of cut over, not a whole lot. So I try to pick an area, say a mile and a half, and try to learn the best way that the deer travel, and try to learn where the doe groups kind of hang out at, and then try to pick out. My main strategy is kind of during the rut and pre-hunt is how they travel, what kind of edges they use, pinch points, bluff gaps. It'll be a place where they can get up a bluff or to a mountain or ridge where it's bluffed off everywhere else. The things that funnel deer to certain areas. And my basic way to start out is when I find a mile and a half place that I'm interested in, learn where all the food is, where the food plots, acorns, honeysuckles, and I walk creeks and drains, finding creek crossings and trying to find a big track and how they're traveling, which way, and then try to make me a plan that before season starts of how I want to hunt a specific buck like that during the rut and pre-rut. Then outside of that, early season, I try to find where a buck is bedding on a secondary corn or something like that, and how he's going to get acorns, early acorns and stuff like that, and try to set up on him bow hunting. That's my main strategies there. So.
Okay. So is it fair to say, like, I guess early season, you're focusing on probably bedding cover for the most part, right? And then you start to transition toward more like of your typical kind of funnels and pinches and things like that during rut. Right.
And I like to learn where the does tend to hang out with. And I run cameras, year round. If you can do that in your state, I recommend that. I don't really use cameras for like this season, but I'll compile the data for next season. And I also keep I got a journal where I keep up with everything that I think is important to me as far as hunts and things that happens during the season, whatever. And I'm always reading that for the next year and then going through my trail camera pictures on specific days and times that bucks are on their feet during the daylight. So the trail cameras will tell you, a lot as far as that information.
Right. That's one thing for me when I started focusing more and more on big woods, because that's one of my favorite things to hunt too, was that kind of long-term data, and playing the long game of getting 1, 2, 3 years worth of information, even if it's not about a specific deer. I've found, especially, my strategy really is probably more so focused in and around kind of primary scrapes in general, and bedding cover and stuff like that. And the reason being is because, I'm be honest, I'm not smart enough to like figure them out any other way. If I can get consistency in an area where it's like, hey, I know that this scrape turns on in this 4-day window, or this is a community scrape that he's gonna hit often in the beginning of October, then he's going to abandon it and then come back at the beginning of November or whatever it is. If I watch that cycle, doesn't matter what deer it is, they're kind of using it. Those communication hubs the same, regardless of what deer it is. That's a lot of times what I use. Where are you hanging your cameras? Are you kind of using the scrape approach? Are you using travel corridors? What's that look like?
It's very rare that I put one on a scrape. I did this year in an area where my wife was hunting because there was a big old scrape and it had, it had the limbs broke and stuff like that. And we hung it up for a week or so during the main part of the rut, and it's interesting to see that most of the time when a big buck would come using it was at night, but there was a couple pretty good bucks in the daylight using it. So, but most of the time, like I say, I don't want them to know I'm hunting them period, so I'm using put them on travel corridors, shelves, above bluff gaps or creek crossings, stuff like that. Anywhere that they can travel or some kind of edge,
Mhm.
and it's going to be specifically a place I feel like I could hunt it. It's not generally just for information. It's somewhere where I would hunt here, and if I think a buck could come through here, or during his normal travel or traveling, cruising for does or whatever, I want it to be a place I can hunt. So that's generally where I put my cameras at.
So that's interesting because again, different guys have different approaches. Some guys, won't ever put a camera anywhere close to where they're going to hunt. Other guys like me, I'll put a camera. I mean, hell, this year probably 2 different times I literally climbed the same tree that I had a camera on because I felt like that was the tree. But the one thing that you mentioned there about scrapes, you put one on this year, and you hit the nail on the head. A lot of times, a lot of nighttime inventory, you get an occasional kind of day walker, and so that kind of brings me to this question of because as I evolve as a hunter, I have a hard time abandoning really good kind of say community scrapes, right? John Eberhart is a guy that I kind of took his methodology or his kind of strategy around hunting scrapes, and kind of steal a little bit from Troy Pottinger because he's really good at it. But then I talked to a guy like Nathan Killen, and he will not. I won't say will not. If he can have his way, he doesn't like to hunt over big sign, whether it's rubs, whether it's scrapes, whatever it is, he's going to hunt off of it. And that I understand the logic behind it and the strategy behind it, and the guy's a killer. I just have a really hard time abandoning it because we're all in love with big sign. And I get it. And I'm just curious, are you kind of the same way? Do you kind of, okay, I have big sign here. I know there's a big deer here. I've seen a big track. I've seen a big rub. Maybe there's a big scrape, but you're not going to hunt right on it. You might hunt just off it. Or what's your approach to that?
Yeah, I like seeing the sign, but I don't really hunt that specific sign, but it just helps with the pieces of the puzzle to kind of get where they're at and how they're traveling and how they're using them scrapes, and going back to Troy, he's like I say, he's real good, and Eberhart. You got to find your style that you feel comfortable with and want to do, and spend your time doing it, and you can be successful doing that. And that's fine. I've listened to them podcasts and all that. It's just extra information that helps me to learn, the bigger pieces of the puzzle to help me for next year's buck or whatever. So, but yeah, I don't generally do it. I like knowing where they're at, but I don't generally mess with the scrapes and stuff that much.
Yeah, that's it's a hard deal for me to break because I just I'm a scrape hunter. You know what I mean?
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
In the early bow season, if I find a scrape line itself, early bow season, when they first start letting them scrape lines out, hey, I'll be all on that.
Right. Yeah, I guess I should have qualified that. There's definitely a time when I will abandon them. It's around that same time frame. Like I've really found, I had 2 of my best encounters this year. It just wasn't meant to be. One was behind a piece of brush at 15 yards. I just didn't get a shot, and another one in PA, I had it. I guess he was at 18 yards, and I couldn't tell which deer it was until it was too late. And I made the rookie mistake and just didn't draw. I should have drawn and waited to see which deer it was because I was trying to decipher which 8-point it was. Because one I wanted to kill, the other one I was not going to kill, and they were both over scrapes, but they were kind of around that October lull time frame. Like they were, and I've grown more and more to like that kind of October 15th or 13th through almost like the 18th to 20th is kind of a frame or a time frame that I've really kind of grown to like, because I feel like my hunting scrape strategies kind of works at that time because one, a lot of guys aren't in the woods because they think it's the lull, and so they kind of, there's not a lot of movement. Food has changed and they're, deer are shifting a little bit. But I found that like those scrapes still kind of seem to be hot, and that's usually when I get like the first kind of set of mature bucks that are going to walk for the first time in daylight around that time frame. Do you kind of see anything similar? Do you have a similar strategy, or how do you play that time of year?
That would be the time frame here. The public land I hunt early like that is October before Halloween. When it gets Halloween, to me, they get on in our area, they get on their feet more.
Mm-hmm.
So they're doing a little bit more cruising, they're spreading the range out more. So, but before that, I would get on a straight line, fresh, big scrape, higher up in the mornings and then in the evenings. I prefer being low in the evenings, closer to a mountain or hill or something where I think they're bedding at, where they're coming off to go to check a scrape or go make their mounting. That's where they're running around,
Right.
doing a little sparring and fighting or whatever. So, but yeah, I would early seasons. Yes, that would be. There's nothing wrong with that. I'd do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Now, do you prefer, because this is another kind of change that I've made over probably like the past 2 years, just I guess slowly, kind of I guess as I evolve, is I've started hunting and having better encounters in the earlier part of October, around that same time frame I was just, we were just talking about, during morning hunts versus evenings. And I just feel like I'm getting way better encounters and just way more action in that kind of, gray light to say 9:30, 10 o'clock time frame than I will at that kind of, I guess during that time of the year. It'd be probably that 4 to 6:30 maybe time frame. Do you kind of feel the same way, or do you prefer mornings or evenings?
Early season, I prefer both. I mean, but it's when the rut comes on, or pre-rut, if I could stay in the stand all day, I would do that. But my wife, when she's hunting with me, she's either hunting evenings or mornings, so I'm coming out, helping her get out or whatever. But like early season, yeah, I like mornings and evenings. More successful in the mornings, but I've had bow hunting. I've had a few success with like 3-year-old bucks in the evening, right the last 15 minutes, something coming off. I'm coming out of their bed and going down to the bottom. So,
Right.
But I prefer. To me, if it can be in the woods hunting, there's no preference to me. But most of my bigger bucks, period, have been killed in the morning early, and there's been one or two that's been around lunch. So
right. It sounds like your preference is just to hunt.
right. Yeah. I'm not a moon man. I'm not a high pressure, low pressure, whatever. If I'm off work and can go, I'm going.
Right.
Unless it's a tornado, lightning, or something like that. I'll hunt rain.
Right.
I like the wind. I like it to be a little windy. I prefer that. So,
okay. What's your kind of preferred wind, as far as like miles per hour? Like, do you like a good stiff wind?
I like it stiff, 15 to 25 mile an hour. I mean, to me, the bigger bucks, I've seen more in a kind of wind like that than a low wind. Or in the evenings, I hate a calm.
Yeah.
That got me in Iowa this year on the last day, where I tried to make a bold move to get close, where these bucks were coming out of this CRP, and the dang wind. The only day that was there that the wind got calm, and it had to be that evening. If you've ever heard about somebody doing a dry ice test, if you take a bucket of dry ice and set it on the floor where it's calm, and it just rolls over and just slowly spreads, and if you took a fan and just turned it on every now and then, it would just blows that thing everywhere. And that's the worst scenario you can have in the evening, and that happened to me and I on the last day, and the bucks didn't come out.
Yeah.
So
no, I totally understand your pain there. I had almost the same thing happen to me in Kansas this year. I was on the ground, went into this place I hadn't hunted before, and looked at it on a map and figured, let me walk in gray light so I don't, booger anything up, and set up in this edge of this CRP that was like kind of a little lip down into this creek bottom. I was like, because I want to be able to see it whenever the light breaks. So I want to kind of figure out where my best ground setup is going to be. And so I did that, and a doe came in behind me at first light. She got out of the way, and I was just getting ready to move, and I just happened to look up, and I saw tines coming through the timber. And I kind of stopped and made a scrape. And I mean, we had 20 to 30, 35 mile per hour winds pretty much like the whole trip, while we were there. I was there for 2 weeks, and I can't think of another day that we didn't have just like a hard wind all day. This day was supposed to have maybe 7 mile per hour winds, and I did not have a stitch of wind. And long story short is I snort wheezed that buck in whenever he turned around to walk away from me, and I was going to lose him. So I snort wheezed him. He came back, saw my decoy, went to circle downwind to me, and there was this little drop right off to my right. And I knew my thermals were probably pulling down into there. And I was like, oh man, if I can just get that 7 mile per hour wind right about now, would be great. Yeah. And it just wasn't meant to be. And he hit this little piece of brush. I was at full draw, and he hit this piece of brush. It was kind of by this down tree. And I could see the front of his tines, the tip of his nose, and the front of his feet. And I needed like 3 more steps, and I had a window. And he just wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to get that wind, and he wasn't going to do it. And he turned around and walked out of my life, and that was it. That was the next to last day, and that was the last encounter I had.
Yeah,
But
my way, I want a steady wind if possible, but I'm hunting regardless. But I love a steady wind, and it seems like something about a higher wind. I've seen more bucks in a higher wind.
yeah, a buddy of mine owns a trail camera company, and he's actually taken a look at all the trail camera data that he has like over the years and looked at wind for when he saw the most, not just movement, but mature buck movement and what those wind kind of ranges were. And I want to say it was something in that like 12 to 15, like up to like 20 mile per hour, if my memory's serving me correctly. Like it was that kind of wind speed range was when he saw the most movement across, several years worth of trail camera pictures. And so,
I believe it.
Yeah. And it really didn't matter if it was a headwind, a tailwind, or whatever the case was, so long as they had consistency, that was whenever you would see the movement.
No, yeah, like I say, I believe it.
Yeah.
And Iowa was another key to that. The wind blow, like I say, at least 10 mile an hour most of the days, and the colder it was, they moved up there more. So
yeah. Now you mentioned, now tell me if I'm wrong here. I kind of caught this when you mentioned it in passing as we were talking about something else, but you mentioned about finding a specific buck. Do you typically just kind of find a buck that you want to hunt and that's the deer you're going to hunt for the year, or are you more of a hunt for opportunity type of approach?
I'm a hunt for opportunity for, a specific buck is fine early season to me, and the people that can pick out a specific buck or find him and know that's him and hunt specific him and kill him consistently that's impressive.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot really do that. I have done it once or twice, but I want to be in the area where I have more than one opportunity. There can be more than one buck come through. I'd rather be, especially in the rut and pre-rut, where bucks are trying to check does out and stuff like that, and you can have a buck come from 4 miles, whatever, to check out a doe group or something like that. That to me, that's my best odds for success, and that I prefer to play them odds. But early season, I look for a specific buck and try to hunt him early season. But when, like I say, Halloween comes on, I flip the switch and hunting corridors and stuff like that for rut activity and pre-rut.
Right. Now, I mean, we talked a little bit about big woods, but I'm imagine where you're at, and I don't know exactly where you're at. I mean, do you have kind of a mix, like the public that's around you? Is it some big woods and mountains, swamps? I imagine probably some hill country. Do you have that kind of diversity in that area, or do you kind of have just like one kind of, I guess, habitat or terrain type in the specific area that you live and hunt?
We got 3 or 4 different main areas that we hunt, and they're, say, one of them's 100-something miles away, say 2.5 hour drive, and then you can go from mountain style hunting to swamp, lowland hunting, and I like it. I like doing that too. I love hunting in the swamps, and the one area I hunt is in the swamps, and then we have a lot of pine management areas that where they're management for timber and stuff like that. And you got a lot of cutovers, and that's interesting hunting, and it holds a lot of deer, and that's some good hunting too. So we have a real good diverse way of tactics or styles of hunting you could do here in different types of terrains. We enjoy all of it.
Right. How are you, I guess, because I have a similar stuff here where it's right around me locally. I have a fair amount of swamp. I don't have a ton of elevation change around me necessarily. And then I travel a little bit in Pennsylvania, within Pennsylvania to get to some big woods pieces and stuff like that. And a lot of my out of state stuff usually is some type of hill country a lot of times. But I'm just curious, because I know for me, each place that I go to when I'm scouting, there's a lot of things that are similar that I kind of take with me, that are kind of tried and true kind of principles, or, whatever you might call them. But I always kind of have to kind of think about things a little bit differently for each type of terrain that I'm going to be in, that I'm going to potentially hunt, especially if I'm hunting, because the wind's certainly going to do different things in different types of terrain. Each has different types of food sources and things like that. So how does your approach change when you're either scouting or hunting these different terrain types?
My biggest thing is, like I say, is when you're looking at an area, don't try to look too small. Try to look at the bigger picture. Say a place like I like hunting in a swamp, there's 12 or 14 different ridge systems or higher land systems that kind of funnel toward this swamp, where if they're going to go to check out any of these ridges, they're going to use that swamp in one way or the other to access it.
Mhm.
So they run them edges in the swamps, and some of them run out through the middle of them. But and it's easier to find tracks and in the swamps and stuff like this to use that. But I'm a big picture type of guy, even on creek cross and stuff like that. Is what's around, say, out to a mile away, where they would use that to cross to get to a different ridge system or a different doe group or different food source, so or to cross roads or something like that. So
Hmm.
I try to look at, like I say, the bigger picture on it instead of just defining into one small area.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Just to kind of understand. It's almost, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's almost you're trying to understand their behavior, what's going to drive their behavior, and maybe behavior might be the wrong word. It might be more what's going to drive or dictate their movement from a topography and habitat standpoint in a broad sense, because you'll kind of look, are you looking and saying like, this is, if every deer could have their choice of being somewhere to be safe or have food or whatever it is, this would be the one place. And then you go out from that and look at it and say, if I were a deer that lived within a mile radius of that, how would I get there?
Right. And also look at it like is whenever bucks break out their bachelor groups, they split up. They all go, they get their own little areas, and you just kind of picture that as a big round pie or a big square or whatever. And imagine a buck is a half a mile apart bedded, and where are they going to go or how they going to go to get to food plots or creek crossings, anything like that. Where would be a good area to catch them doing that travel, or are they going on check on Mary Jane that's over here living St. Louise, or this girl over here that lives over here the other half a mile away, whatever. How they going to use specific edges and stuff, because bucks love using edges and thicker cover, cut over edges, stuff like that, ledges, shelves, things like that. Just a habitat inside of a habitat to how they're going to use something to get somewhere.
That's an interesting way to say it. Habitat inside a habitat. I like that, because that's really what we're looking for then, is like within those areas, like where's the diversity, right? Where do you have just a bunch of stuff that's coming together in one place?
And even if hunters push them up, or or if just a doe gets in heat, how would you use to travel to get, with a buck following behind or whatever. So just things like that. It's a lot of things to kind of think of, but I just try to expand my mind a little bit when I'm doing that, because believe me, I've grown up hunting all kind of ways, from sitting on scrapes to sitting on food plots or whatever. And to me, this is the style that I use now. Is I see more bucks than I do anything, and been more successful doing it. So.
When you take a look at that big kind of picture of the area that you're going to hunt, and we'll just say it's a square mile, like, for lack of a better, just for a reference.
Right.
Yeah, I think people can kind of wrap their head around, like, okay, I'm going to look at this ridge system, and I see all these ridges, and maybe I've got some secondary ridges that maybe look like good bedding opportunities, right? And maybe, this thick covers over here is probably going to hold does, and they're probably going to want to get there, right? And we've got these benches that are all kind of connecting these ridges together, and so it seems like a good kind of travel corridor or whatever the case is, right? I think guys can kind of look at a map and maybe see where some of those things start to kind of, come together. I think where some people get lost, and I'm guilty of this as well, is, how do you then go about breaking down the spot within the spot, right? So you've kind of got a sense now, like, okay, deer are going to probably move like this on this square mile area. But now I've got to find the spot within the spot and ultimately the tree in that spot to hunt. How are you going about breaking it down to that level?
My biggest tactic for scouting is postseason. As soon as the season's over, go boots on the ground. I'll hit all them ridges, all the edges, all the creek crossings, everything you can find right down where each specific type of food source, edges, unique changes, and here when it's real cold, those and even bucks like bedding where the first sun shines on points and secondary points, because I've been warned too. So noting stuff like that. But postseason that's my biggest part of scouting. Me and my wife we'll go camp, and I'll turkey hunt in the mornings, and we'll scout and look for sheds and stuff in the afternoon. I put a lot of miles doing that. Just learn your area the best you can then, and then depending on how acorns work, stuff like that in the fall, you make a plan of how you want to hunt.
Now, do you take like a section, like for example, because one of the approaches I've kind of used, and it's funny because as you're kind of talking, I'm thinking myself through, my postseason scouting, because I've been kind of tackling this big woods piece. It's close to me, and it's to the tune of 100,000+ acres. All the other adjoining pieces, it might get close to 200.
Wow.
And so it's big, and so it's daunting to look at. And so my first step was last year is I just kind of picked a spot where I thought, all right, the terrain looks pretty interesting around here. Some of it looks hard to access, right? So I shouldn't have a lot problems with a lot of people. That was kind of
that's another good point too.
Yeah.
Access.
And so I kind of circled that area, and then even within that area, I mean, I'm still talking a couple thousand acres,
Right.
and so then I was kind of whittled it down to like these couple ridges, or whatever the case is that I kind of liked what was there. And I did some driving by and a little bit of scouting, kind of marked where some clear cuts, are located and stuff like that. And then I took my first scouting trip there, and it was just a complete, I won't say a waste of time, because anytime I spend time in the woods isn't a waste of time, but I didn't get a whole lot of hunting value out of it necessarily. I probably learned more of where not to be than anything else, which I guess is valuable. But
that's very valuable.
Yeah.
You learn where not to be, so that's a good thing.
Yeah. And then what I did was I ended up talking to a guy who was local to there, because I had found some sign, but I needed to qualify, because I was like, I don't know if what I'm finding is actually good for the area or not good. It's like, should I be finding bigger sign, or is this actually the best sign I'm going to find? Because it was really spread out. It's a big woods piece.
Wow.
And so I ended up hanging some cameras over some scrapes and found some really good bucks, this year. And so I hunted it once, just a couple hour drive from my house. And then I went back in late season and did just kind of still hunted for 2 days, but was really kind of there to try to figure more of the puzzle pieces out, so to speak. And what I kind of figured out after that first scouting mission that I had, and this was something that my friend Johnny Stewart's told me, and his words were ringing in my ear whenever I was driving back from that first scout, where I was like, man, I don't think I know what the hell I'm doing. And questioned myself. And what he's always told me, because he hunts a big woods piece in PA, the Alleghenies, which is it's like a wildlife, I forget what it's referred to, but it's a super remote area, hundreds of thousands of acres, just like ridiculously big. And what he's always done is said, find a place that you really like, and then just spend time saying, all right, this year I'm going to learn this spot, and just learn that spot. And then the next year, add another spot to it, and then learn that spot. And he's like, if you look at it as a whole, it's too much to take in. If you can start breaking it into smaller pieces and just learn sections of it intimately, he's like, you're going to be a lot further ahead. So that was kind of my approach. Do you take a similar approach to in terms of like breaking it? Very similar?
Yeah. Very similar. And I'm going to use it as another guy that has done some podcasts. I'm going to use his term. You find your spot and claim that spot is yours, and whether it's public land or what, and learn it completely inside out. Learn if other people come on it, learn how that affects the deer and stuff like that. You find a spot that you like, and that deer's there, or deer's going to use. You use it as yours, claim it, and then and learn a bit of it and hunt it, and you'll be successful.
Right. How much when you are scouting in those areas, because I imagine Alabama's a big hunting state. I'm imagining you're seeing a fair amount of pressure too. How much does finding other people's kind of stands that they let up and stuff like that factor into your hunting strategy? How much are you hunting them as much as you're hunting the deer?
Not that much. I try to stay where, if I know where somebody's using it, I don't access that way. I don't like encroaching on other ones like that. So I won't do it. I'll try to get, like you say, on the entrance and exit or whatever. I try to where most people ain't gonna go. So most of the places is, not all of them, but most places over a mile to mile and a half, hour and a half to 2 hour walk. So it's gonna be somewhere I don't see that many people. So I don't think I've seen but one guy this year, maybe one last year. But anyway, so
yeah,
some places not that far, but the majority of them is. So
right, yeah. The it's interesting, when you do start to get off the beaten path that far back. At least what my experience has been is that the respect for that the hunters have for each other that far back increases. Anytime I have a trail camera that's, I might hang one somewhere because I'm like, this would be a good spot for inventory. I know there's going to be people around here. I'm not going to hunt it, but I know that there'll be deer even at night pass through, and I'll know at least that there's what good deer are around. That trail camera will get stolen, and I'll have it hung up 10 feet off the ground. I walk 2 miles back somewhere. I'll get one guy who's back there scouting too, waving at my camera, letting it alone. Might run into him at the parking lot, but it won't bother anything. We might even share intel with each other because I'm like, hey man, if you're back there working too, I'll even tell him like, hey, take a look at the card when you're back there. If there's good deer on it, take a look. Like I don't mind. If you do, and I meet you in the parking lot, just tell me what you saw, so I ain't got to walk back there and check it. You know what I mean? So I just feel like
you'll build that camaraderie with some folks like that. The real true woodsmen and dedicated ones. Yeah, that's a neat thing.
Yeah, for sure. What as you're kind of building your strategy throughout the course of the year, because you've mentioned, I say it wrong. I'll say acorns. I know I say it wrong.
Acorns down here, acorns. So acorns. So.
Yeah, I know. I say it wrong. My buddies that I do have that are from the South, they certainly make sure that we know that it's not. Yeah. But I would be appropriating your Southern culture if I said acorns, and I just can't do that. So
that's fine. Mass crops is a good thing for
right. For it. There you go. But as you're kind of making your strategy, man, how are you prioritizing? Like, are you more focused on cover, or are you more, focusing on changing food? Because I know some guys it's all about cover, and I know other guys where it's like, yeah, they like to be in the cover, but man, in that early early October timeframe, like they're really kind of chasing the changing food sources. So what's your approach to that?
In Alabama, that's totally different because deer are mainly a browser, so we don't really have a killing frost that much. So they can browse and just walk and browse forever. There's plenty of browse most of the time. And acorns, especially in the big woods, if we had a good crop this year, we had a tremendous crop this year. They could lay somewhere and then walk 10 foot and eat a bucket of acorns and then lay down and be good for the day. So our food source does not change that much until it's real late season. They'll start getting close to some good food plots or something like that, honeysuckles. So I don't count that as a factor that much. It's just, and doe groups are pretty much homestead areas and kind of find out where they hang out and just concentrate on stuff like that on my main strategy.
So with that, do you find that after those bucks kind of peel velvet and disperse, do you find that you still have pretty consistent kind of, I guess, movement in general, or maybe consistent isn't the right word. Maybe it's more predictable? Because I know around here, I'm going to get that dispersion or that dispersal that's going to happen. Usually I see them peel around here from all like the trail camera data I've had over the years, probably around between like the 10th and like the 13th of September is when they'll peel and they'll start to disperse. And I'll lose some bucks. I'll get some new bucks in areas or whatever the case is. And then like this year, I mean, we had a crazy mass drop this year. And I mean, bucks just disappeared. Like at the drop of a hat, we're gone. And just kind of completely, I won't say completely relocated, but finding them was a lot more challenging this year than it had been in years past.
Right.
But that's partially because, we're going to get some colder temps. They're going to suck up those acorns. And, that's just kind of the game plan. Like you got to be where those are at. Otherwise you're probably not going to be in the game. But it sounds to me like because there is more consistent food there, that you're probably going to get more predictability for a longer part of October than you would maybe say in Pennsylvania. Am I reading that right, or is that wrong?
Well, it's predictably unpredictable because bucks, mature bucks especially, they don't want to be messed with. They don't like being hunted or don't like being around each other once they split up. And the place that I hunt early is similar to what you say. By October, they're already split up pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
So if they find where their first food like we had this year, they don't have to go far, so they're not messing around in daylight. So it's very limited movement until the pre-rut and rut. So it's not easy at all. So
Right.
I would think in the Midwest and stuff, it might be a little bit, but that just depends on how a crop feels and stuff like that. It's hard because if they're laying out there in the crops, which would be what most bucks would do, I would think, is while they're there, they ain't got to go anywhere. So it's hard to hunt them until them's cut, I guess. But
Right.
so to me, that's just the way it is here. They're unpredictable, especially when you got a lot of acres and stuff like that. Because you can't hardly find them because they don't disappear. They can't fly out there. They don't have to move as much. So you got to be exactly where they're at. And I don't want to do that because if you're exactly where they're at and you're close enough to know where they're at, they know where you at most of the time. So I don't want to do that.
Right.
We have thick laurel bushes and stuff like that. There's no way to get to them where they bed on these secondary points or ledges. And sometimes it's even in the bottoms on little shelves that are above, say 10 foot above creek, stuff like that. There's no way that you can get to them like that without them knowing you're there. So they use thermals. They use thermals, with their thermals is coming up to their nose and they got wind coming over their back and they can see way out in front of them and they got kind of a hard back to them with the beds. It's almost impossible. So.
Right. So correct me if I'm wrong. So it sounds like you would need to be hunting bedding areas, but you're not trying to get right up on a bed, essentially. I mean, I've got buddies that are like, they'll try to get within 50, 60 yards of a bed,
I'm not that stealthy, so I can't do it. So.
No, I'm not either. I was just literally talking to a buddy of mine about that right before you and I started chatting. We were just talking about, hunting beds, because he's a bed hunter. That's what he is. And we scout together every year and we'll find beds and he'll kind of talk me through a setup. And I was just explaining one of the setups that I was thinking about, for this upcoming season on this one piece. And I'm like, I'll blow every deer out of the state. I was like trying to access that bed. I was like, there ain't no way I can do it. I was like, I got to find a transition area somewhere in and around there that I can successfully get in to hunt it with, my access is good. I was like, cause I think I know where they're at. I was like, but in order to get there, I was like, I just don't think I have a path to get there where I'm not going to screw it up, essentially.
Yeah. Our trip pointed that out about they were bedding so close to the corn or beans that they were coming out of it was impossible in the morning hunt them. So, and I think of that. I use that logic kind of with our bucks and stuff. I don't even think about getting anywhere near a bed in the morning because you don't know. It's dark and I'm going out dark, so you don't know what stage they are as they're going to their bed or how they go into their bed or areas. So you might bump them out and then never know it.
Yeah.
So at the closest I get to hunting any kind of bed, it'll be in the evening where I feel like I go and come off from a bed area up on a secondary point or something like that, and I'm at the bottom. So I'm hoping they're not going to see me, and then it's generally green that time of year. So, so that's the closest I'll get to a bed.
Right. So those out of state trips, you're always working with limited intel because you're not from there. Even if you make scouting trips out and stuff like that, it's always hard. But I'm curious in general. Like, I know you like to postseason scout. It sounds like you're kind of really baking your plan during that time of the year.
Mm-hmm.
But how much time are you spending scouting during the course of the season versus hunting? Like, do you typically have your spots kind of like, all right, I know that this is going to be the spot. I just got to wait for the right time, or are you kind of scouting throughout the season to try to find the hottest spot to kind of be? Because maybe it's this area is going to be good. I just need to find where the sign's being laid down within this 15, 20 acre area to know where I need to be set up or where I need to kind of put a stand or whatever the case is. How are you kind of doing that during the season?
Well, during the season, I have historical places that generally during the rut or pre-rut, there's going to be some kind of action going on, and it's generally within a week or two period. But I'm also looking at different areas or newer areas just in case something happens to that area, or say if I kill one or two or whatever, and I need a different spot. So I have the historical areas, but I'm always looking for new areas during the season. And there's plenty of people that I know. There's an older man that we were talking about scrape hunting. This guy's 70-something plus years old, and he hunts scrapes specifically most of the time. And he's doing that in the evening, and he's scouting every morning, and he's hunting scrapes in the evening. So I mean, you can you can go that approach. But I like I say, I have my historical areas, but I don't really move around in them areas because I know generally how they travel or going to travel. So it's more like spending a little bit of time concentrating on them spots. But look, I'm always looking for different areas.
Right. Yeah. You can never have enough areas, but what I'm hearing is like you've done your homework to this point. You know these places are going to turn on. Now it's just about hunting it smart. And
They're liable to come in and start cutting timber or something in there, and then they'll have it blocked off. You can't hunt within half a mile of a timber operation. So you got to have an alternate plan for sure.
right. Yeah. Yeah. It's especially public land hunting, man. That's the one thing, guys that I know that, maybe are when they just kind of start, maybe they'll, message me or whatever, ask me for some advice. My first thing is always like, have plan A through Z. Because, basically everything up to Z probably isn't going to work this year for whatever reason, for any number of reasons,
But my gun hunt for only specific days, and and you only have so many of them. And if you're off work or if you're taking vacation, whatever, so you got to have your plan pretty much made up because it's kind of hard to change stride with a limited number of days. So.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I want to get to this deer that you killed this year, man, because that thing is just a hammer. I could pick your brain for hours just about hunting in general, but I want to be sensitive to your time and get to this story because this thing is just a hammer. And I caught wind of it after I kind of learned of you, and then I got online, did a little searching, saw a video, and this thing is just a freaking magnum. And I guess my first question is, did you have any intel about this specific deer prior to hunting him? Or like, I know you like to hunt for opportunity, but did you know this guy was around?
Yeah, I did. Well, he is like I've only killed 2 bucks that I knew was there and was kind of hunting on purpose. I wasn't for sure 100% that he was alive this year for sure, but I was pretty positive. I didn't have a trail cam picture of him.
A deer like that, those people would have.
Well,
a deer like that, people would have talked about. You would have heard if someone killed a deer like that, so you could make a pretty good guess.
Oh yeah, but you don't ever know, and that's true. And some people in the area that I hunt, they kind of keep things kind of on the down low. So you might have heard, might not have heard, but
okay.
And the first I had pictures of him. I got counting this year. I have 3 years of pictures of him. The first year I had pictures of him. He was non-typically kind of like he is now. And but I had pictures of him in November in daylight, and I had a couple pictures of him in March, and he was still toting his antlers, but he looked rough. He was just skin up looking, looked kind of sick, and he was running around with 2 or 3 other bucks that had lost their antlers. And I showed pictures to the biologist, and we couldn't really make any determinations what was wrong with him or whatever. And then because you got to talk of CWCD or EHD or whatever that affects places. So but the next season I got him, and he was walking around in November, man. He was close to 160 inches, it looked like, and he only had 1 split, but you could tell it was him by the way his frame was. And I showed a few people pictures, and I hunted him. I missed him by 1 day. He come by where I was hunting at the next day of daylight, following some does at 9:30, and so. But but this year I'd made a plan. I've killed a 158 with a gun that's in the record book, buckmaster and stuff, and I've killed a 142 with 21 and a half inch inside spread bow buck that's in the record book. And my goal this year was, well, I'm going to try to kill a buck and put a record book with a muzzleloader. And this guy who I was going to kind of concentrate on is whenever it comes, I was going to wait till November because I knew from the 2 years experience with the camera that he was kind of moving around in daylight a little bit in November. So, and we had a muzzleloader hunt that was a 5-day muzzleloader hunt in November. And I had to work the first 4 days of it. And the last day of it, and my wife went and set up, and I eased down there, and she was a half a mile away from him. I was hunting in his area, and I had around 9:30 or so. I had it's a pretty good sized body, like a 6 or 7 point. A good frame, but he just didn't have that much of a rack come by. And I was watching him. And he was putting around eating acorns and easing around, and then a few minutes later, something caught my eye, and I just seen this big rack kind of slipping through, and it got behind some leaves, and it's still real green. I eased around where I could look through the scope, and I knew it was a big rack, but I couldn't really tell how big it was. And he stayed behind trees forever, and he just flipped out. And as soon as he flipped out, I shot him at 45 yards at muzzleloader, and I could see through the scope that he done a mule kick and took off. And then a few minutes later, I heard what I thought was a good crash and stuff. But you know how things are. If
Yeah.
you're not 100% sure until you see them. So I give him about 30 minutes, and I had to pee like crazy. So I eased up and tried to do all that quiet. And I said, well, I'm going to go ahead and start putting some of the stuff in the pack and stuff like that. And I forgot about that pee bottle and knocked it off, made all kind of dang racket. So, burning everything. So I eased down and trying to find blood, and missed it the first time. Had to come back and do a little bit of gritting for a second, found the blood trail, and he'd only went about 40 yards. He'd run into a beech tree and knocked the bark off of it. I said, golly, that was part of one crash. He chipped a couple horns, but I seen him laying there, and I could see the one side real non-typically, and the boy tears started coming because I knew that I was pretty sure it was him on camera, and he just looked humongous laying on the ground. But he was like you say, if you've seen pictures of him, he's a big old 18 point. He didn't have a wide spread. He's 15.5 inches inside spread, but he had everything else.
Yeah, he did.
6-inch plus bases and carried the mass out, and 14-inch D2s. So he's just a monster buck, and right now he's a state record muzzleloader. So that's
nice.
I didn't even have that in my thought process until I was going to get him scored, and somebody called me asking about it, and I said, I don't think so. But anyway, he ended up beating the old state record by 5 inches. So.
Yeah, I saw, what was he? He was 193 and some change green scored. What did he end up netting?
It was not 196 and 3/8 gross. So that's that was Alabama whitetail record. But Buckmaster's was 195 and 6/8.
Oh, nice.
So anyway, that's what we're going by. We don't Boone and Crockett's. It's something we're not real big fans of in Alabama. So
yeah, that's
and it would, I think 195 net's what it has to be to even be in Boone and Crockett. So that's a monster deer. So I don't think he'd make it.
Well, he's a monster deer regardless, man. Like that.
Yeah.
I don't think you would get an argument from anybody that saw that. I don't think you'd find anybody that say that wasn't a monster deer.
He's a dream buck. He's a monster, and he deserves all the credit and the publicity he gets. I mean, for a deer to get to that and put on that type of bone is amazing. Especially on public land. And
yeah.
And like you say, in Alabama, he's upper tier for sure. So
yeah, I mean, how old was he?
6.5.
6.5.
Yeah.
What was the spot? What did the spot look like that he was living? I mean, I don't want GPS. I don't even want like a name of a ridge or anything. I'm curious, like what the habitat looked like in general. Was it clear cut? Was it a bottom? Was it a side of a ridge?
No, so that's one thing. You ask anybody, and I'll tell you. In the mornings, I'm always hunting high. Up the upper third of ridge lines and stuff like that. And he was on the upper third, going to maybe he was probably going to a secondary point. Him and his buddy to bed or something, because they were heading toward like a security area. So,
okay.
So I'm assuming that's what he was doing. But it was, he had crossed the creek. That's another thing I preach: creek crossing, some kind of drainage crossing, something like that gives you a lot of information. At least a good base to start, because a big track does not lie. Big tracks and big droppings are two things that don't lie. Rubs is kind of iffy and scrapes are kind of iffy, but anyway, he had crossed the creek and then was on the upper third going. The reason I don't hunt creek crossings in the morning because the wind is too unpredictable, and there are hilly areas because it bounces and stuff, and then water affects thermals.
Right.
It's easier to control the thermals and the wind on the upper part in the morning. So.
All right. Now, what did you think when you shot him and you get down, you make all that racket, and you're walking up on him? Like, what was your first thought when you saw that deer and you realized which one it was?
I was tears mainly. I was crying and dang praying and all that. I was just totally excited because, like I say, it took me till I was 31 years old to kill a decent buck, and then I've killed some good ones and a couple more big ones, what I call big, and then to do it again, you got places that you try to be in your hunting career, whatever, or goals you set, and to accomplish that goal of putting one in the record book with everything, it just a flow of emotions and stuff like that. So it feels like all the hard work and stuff is come to a good point in my life. So to do it with my wife, and when I finally got up there to her, I had to drag I tried to drag him where I knew I was going to have help. So I tried to drag him for over an hour to get to where I could get him where people wouldn't know exactly where I was hunting at. Then I get up there to her, and I was tore up. I had blood all over me and sleeves pulled up. And I got up to her and I said, I got him. And she was excited. So like I said, we got 4 people come back and help us, and it took another 3 or 4 hours to get him out. So
That's a good 3 or 4 hours, though, man.
Them great 3 or 4 hours.
That's right, man. Like it's that old saying, like you don't really realize how out of shape you are until you have to drag a deer. And then the other part is like you really don't care how out of shape you are after you have to drag a big deer.
You don't care how it is. You get a couple good friends that help, and you tell all the story and the story over again, and other stories, and all that is great times. I love that's one of the most fun is getting them out. You don't worry about how you're gonna get them out, whatever. You got to worry about getting them flat first. You get them flat on the ground, and you can get them out somehow, piece by piece or what. So
that's right.
That's the last thing to worry about is getting them out. So.
That's right. Well, he's a great buck, man. I'm happy for you. It's
really
killer. Congratulations. Yeah, they're just a killer buck. I'm, thankful you were, willing to share the story, here. And so folks out there listening can hear it, public land, man. There are giants. They can be found. That's for sure.
Even in Alabama. And I appreciate it. And I appreciate all the podcasts. And like I say, you've been doing it for 6 or 8 years, and that's impressive. And the guys that are doing this stuff, I know you say you got a job too, so you've got a job and doing this. That's a lot of stuff to keep up with, a lot of work. And I'm glad that information like that, because I listen to podcasts now. I'd never heard of one until I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago or something. I got a nephew who lives out in California, and he was talking about Joe Rogan's podcast. I said, "Oh, what?" Anyway, that's that's one of the first ones I listened to. So.
Right. That's awesome, man. Well, I have one last question for you, man, and this is always the hardest one. I always save it for last, and I'll let you get out of here. Be considerate of your time, but so imagine you have a basketball team for a 3-on-3 tournament, okay? But it's a basketball team of the best 3 DIY deer killers that if you had to have 3 tags filled on public land for whitetails anywhere in the country, and you could pick only 3 people. They can be people they can be people who are alive, people who are no longer with us, they can be people who are famous, whatever it is. Who are those 3 people that you would put on your team if you needed 3 public land whitetail tags filled and your life depended on it?
3 public land whitetail tags. I'm gonna give one to Tony Myers. He's a local older guy in our area. He's a big killer, and he just grew up hunting public land, so he does it with a prosthetic now. So, but that'll be one. Tony Myers from Moulton, Alabama, and another one.
Told you it was going to be the hardest question of the night.
That's a hard question because I don't know people that hunt public land that much. And there's another thing is I don't know that many people out of the state because I've listened to a few podcasts.
It's all right. They can all be from Alabama too, man. That's okay.
Can they help me? I'm going to talk to my brother in there, Matthew, just to help me, so.
Yeah.
And another one, public land. Let's see. You're going to have another 30 minutes added on this podcast, me trying to think of somebody.
Told you it was the hardest one. Save it for last.
If I can go with them, can I go with them?
Yeah, you can go with them.
This is one of my favorite guys that is on TV, and I don't know how much he has some public land on his thing, but it's Fred Eichler because of his excitement and his energy. So
yeah.
I'm going to have his recurve stuff, so I'm going to say Fred Eichler. So
there you go.
If I think I'm not throwing any ill will toward anybody else, anything like that. But I just, public land people, all the ones that are doing good. I know y'all have named off several great guys in y'all's podcast and stuff, naming them. And so, but right. Personally, I don't know that many people personally outside of the state. So.
No, and that's fair. Those are 3 great names, man. It's your team. You can build it however you want. You're the GM. So you're good to go.
I appreciate it. And I've listened to a bunch of podcasts on, the Troy Ponder you're talking about. I've listened to some of his, and he hunts different kind of mountains and with dealing with the lions and the wolves and stuff like that. And that's cool. I mean, I'd love to see that part of the world. I've not been that far out hunting like that. And I've done a mountain lion hunt and some brown bear hunts and stuff like that. So I like dealing with the predator, so that part of what he does is cool. And then some other guys that's the podcast, they get a lot of podcast publicity are very good to listen to too. So,
Yeah.
and I appreciate all your work and all that's great information for anybody because there's a bunch of different styles that people are successful doing it and listening to all of them. And I'm all about all that. So
Nice. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. And it sounds like we might have to do a second podcast at some point to talk some brown bear hunting because that's one of the things that's on my bucket list is a brown bear hunt. But we'll save that. We'll save that for another.
If it's in your mind, you need to do it because it's an amazing hunt.
Nice.
I'll just give you that.
Nice. Yeah. So we'll have to have that be a separate podcast. So, but I appreciate your time tonight, man. You have yourself a good evening, and I hope to talk to you soon.
I appreciate you too, buddy.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there too. I'd be super appreciative if you'd be able to do those two things for me. And before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Spartan Forge, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Skull Brew Coffee Company. And until next time, we'll see y'all.